So for the first question for today that I have for you, whoever would like to answer that right now, is what new opportunities for commercial space activities does the LEO offer at the moment, and how can companies capitalize on these opportunities right now?
I can get started if that's okay. So one of the things I think as you look into the number of satellites we are launching in LEO, between the number of satellites and the debris out there, there is this whole opportunity about space domain awareness or space situational awareness, SDA or SSA. So one of the things we at Maxar are doing is we just released a product called non-Earth imaging, where using our satellites in low Earth orbit, we are able to take very detailed pictures, 2.5 centimeters to 10 centimeter resolution, where we are basically, this is meant for space object characterization, what's happening with a given object. And if you're following the news, I think earlier this week, International Space Station had to maneuver because one of the commercial satellites was on its path. So I would say because of the increased number of satellites, not only for Earth observation, for communication, and other modalities, I think space domain awareness, space situational awareness is becoming a very important opportunity in LEO, as well as the debris monitoring and as well as mitigation. I would say LEO is offering a lot of opportunities for new space economy for these applications.
Yeah, I think I'd second a lot of what you said there, Kumar. I think as like the growing number of satellites is there, it's certainly a bigger emerging opportunity is keeping track and monitoring all of these. I'd say as well as this, we've definitely seen in the past, this past 5 years, the primary opportunity and the primary push has been through communication. So, high-speed internet constellations is that's been the big push currently. I think now that precedent is set, there's a lot of new and more out there opportunities in LEO, which have really been enabled by the stuff that's gone on over the past 5 years. So we're seeing a lot more interest in new Earth observation platforms that are going towards the small sat scale. So as with decreasing sensor sizes, we can fit these onto something like a 6U platform. Interestingly, in-orbit servicing and manufacturing, I think is just going to go from strength to strength in the next couple of years. We're seeing people here in the UK that we support doing things like in-orbit manufacturing, looking at CubeSats that can go and manufacture certain materials in space. And this is something, we'd only ever seen on the research ends before. But these are becoming new opportunities now. So I think it's a really, really, really exciting time.
Shall I jump in, Martinas? Is that right? Sure. I'm not sure how we're doing this, but I'll jump in. I mean, completely echo both of those comments from Kumar and Charlie. I myself have left Airbus actually to join a small startup, which is looking at delivering science from orbit in LEO. And I think just this massive flux in industry, especially in terms of frequency and costs of launch, it just means that different barriers are removed. So probably it's fair to say the only thing that we can say with absolute certainty is there is a lot of uncertainty as to what's now been enabled. And that idea that you can take on a new mission and look at prototyping something fairly rapidly in space has always been there, but that barriers to that have been even further removed by the change in the market. So I think that's why we'll see lots of really quite rapid growth as well. This idea that prototyping in orbit in earnest can really happen. And I think what I would say to that is we're seeing, not just are we seeing lots of new launch companies arrive, but lots and lots of new space manufacturers arrive on scene, and in an increasingly competitive way right across the globe. And that only lends itself to more innovative and varied applications. So I think we're quite lucky to be around right now because we are in that S curve of this new era of entry into low Earth orbit.
I would chime in on what Ian was saying and also Charlie before. Mentioning one data point. I think there's something related to what Ian said, which is very telling. I think that we have experienced in the last few years an abundance of demonstration also in orbit of technologies that can be rolled out as business model. So we know that we've lived for a long time with the a big dominance of one traditional sector, which is telecommunication application via satellite. Then there was Earth observation certainly jumping higher over time, and navigation staying on another side. But in the last few years, we have seen increase in the business volume of technological rollout in space for a variety of different applications. And that's for sure, Martinez, to the scope of this session, also in LEO. So there was, I remember, a data point associated to the fact that there's been for a decade, there was something like about 25% of missions that were devoted to pure technology. And then in a single year, which was probably 2019 or 2020, there was a jump to 35, which was a clear sign that there was an explosion of this kind of demonstration. And I think that is has created the basis for now the business case that we see invested by, we have seen invested in recent years by venture capital funds. Now it's a bit of a delicate moment, if you allow me, for these businesses. But certainly that technological creation has created the basis for the investments. And actually now I think that it's the moment when it must be turned into reality. So it is IoT going to be the next big thing. It's going to be indeed situational awareness in space, space weather monitoring. For me at the moment, it's very difficult to call the shots on that one. I have a bet myself on in-orbit servicing in a time scale of 5-10 years. But I think that it's still early to see which is going to be the application which is going to win on top of the traditional ones of Earth observation, telecom, and navigation, which are going nowhere.
Okay, so the following question that I have here for one of you here, obviously we'd like to hear from everybody. What new business models are you currently see emerging for commercial activities in LEO, and how can companies ensure that their activities are financially viable and sustainable in the long term?
Yeah, maybe I can jump in here. I think that one of the models that we are seeing is using satellite as a service, and that's something which is quite new and wasn't, that expected by many of us. And that's something which was done by many companies with some, let's say, major satellite integrators as well. But I'm not sure that this financial model is, viable to be used right now in the times with the COVID, which is still with us, and with the geopolitical situation, which makes the world much bigger than smaller, because the globalization is not that very interesting, right now. So I think satellite as a service model is something that maybe not now, but in the future might be very useful, because people tend to pay for the service rather than buy a full solution. Like we are using Netflix, prepays and the monthly subscriptions, and we do not buy movies anymore. So I think that model will be in space very popular, but we need to give it time. We need to give it a few years, because the world right now is probably not the best, in the best situation to use that model.
Yeah, if I may add to what Nikolai was saying, I think, satellite as a service, I think we can enlarge to space as a service or space data as a service. I think that's indeed also where we see a lot moving to. We are active in microgravity R&D applications, so also the whole space research as a service, and even models like contract research organization, where, for example, biotech applications data are generated and the data is provided to whoever contracts this type of service. We also see as potential models coming up in the not too far future.
I'd add a couple of points to that to agree with a couple of the comments that have been made by Nikolai and by Edgar, to say that to the question of what business models are we seeing, I think we're seeing a vast range of business models. This isn't unique to delivery of service from LEO. And I think whilst to Edgar's point that we've seen a huge rollout of technological innovation, often what we see is just innovation in the business model delivering capability that's existed for a very long time. And actually, when we think about our experience as consumers here on Earth, I think we've all benefited at times from different services that are offered to us at a price that doesn't make sense, and we benefit from that. And I think that's going to be true in space as well. And time will tell as to where the balance is between engaging with customers and getting traction with a service offering, and that actually making sense in terms of long-term sustainability of a business model.
Yeah, regarding financing, if I may, I think that we all also saw the very popular trend on going into the stock market by space companies, which should be a quick way to get sort of a enough amount of money to get them running for a long time. But again, that's probably a good way to get financing when we do not have this kind of worldwide problems. Right now, when we see at the Nasdaq or any other stock exchange, like for example the Eastern Europe, the prices for the companies are not as high as it should be, even though they might have the successes. So regarding the financing, we also see a little bit of changes right now. Yes, I mean, going from conventional VCs to the stock exchange, and I'm pretty much excited to see what will be the next solution to keep the space industry, financed, because we probably also need some innovation in that area as well.
Some quick comment on the business models. 100% agree with Simon on evolving business models. All these industries, some are new, some are established. Business models keep changing all the time. But one thing I would like to add to the conversation is, as you build these business models, dual purpose technologies serving military as well as other markets, I think gives you a lot more success than just focusing on one single market.
Yes, go ahead, Martin.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I'm starting a little bit to follow this conversation because of my connection, so I hope you can hear me well. But I also really would validate all the previous comments that have been made on the development of the industry. One point, of course, the necessity to bring space sustainability requirements in mission design to a next level. We're talking about a six-figure satellite population by 2030. I think it's also our responsibility to be able to bring space sustainability in business to the next frontier. And in this regard, there are many ways to accompany this new wave of new entrants. And there's a lot of industry-led efforts that are going this. There are also at the UN. You have, for instance, this recent partnership with China on the Tiangong space station. We're seeing very new ways of doing space that wasn't here 10 years ago. And we're also seeing this wave of this new democratization process of space technology gaining even more traction with new space agents being established across the world. So it's a very exciting time also to look at this economic growth, and yeah, it's very interesting to listen to everyone's perspective on this important topic.
So speaking about business models, as we mentioned just a second ago, so maybe you can talk also about the future of the commercial activities in LEO as well, and how can companies prepare for the changing landscape of the industry in the coming years? Yes, go ahead, Ian.
I think we have a very polite panel. We're all being quite cautious to not talk over each other. So well done, team. Well, I mean, dare I say it? I think crystal ball might be sort of needed for some of these comments. I mean, how do you respond? There's very rapid discussions happening in Europe about changing of regulations for deorbit and things like this. I think that the first and foremost principle must be try to be as responsive as possible. So, build out a business plan that is not too set in stone and is not overly focused on a single market if you can avoid it. I think Kumar was just making that exact point. I think fundamentally in terms of making sure that the business you bring to market is sustainable, going back to that previous question, you need to make sure that you really iron out the need for people. If you don't always back up that need with a human somewhere wanting to buy your service or buy your product, then you need to be, you won't be set for sustainability. But in terms of responding to change in a really rapidly changing industry, I think that's very, very challenging. The first and foremost thing you must do is plan to have the change, actually, and with that in mind, have contingencies in your business. That's what the commercial construction sector do. It's what the commercial housing sector do. They plan contingencies in their business plans, and indeed space companies need to be mindful to do the same as the whole sector emerges and changes.
Well, I think so. I think Ian got it very, very well. There is at times there is a disconnect between the perception of somebody wanting to launch a business, in this case a space business, and the fact that there must be humans on the other side of the line paying the bill for that business. Right? It's something that at times is forgotten. It's coming from somebody who has been with SES satellites, so telecommunication big time, for 12 years, and I think that the success of that business model is precisely triggered by the fact that there is there were millions of people who wanted to receive their satellite TV from space, and so that's why, I mean, it's not Leo, Martinez. I hope you pardon me, but there is a lot of talking about the moon and exploitation of resources there, right? Well, business cases associated to that are very challenging, meaning that they must have something paying the bills in between. If you don't have that, I mean, there is nobody on the moon who is going to pay you any bill, apart from the big agencies, and therefore it's becoming an institutional business model in any case. So I think that all these technologies we've been talking about, the new systems, the new services, will have to have a lot of flexibility to pivot in their business model, according to the emergence of the payers, so of the humans who are going to pay the bill for these businesses. And today we see some businesses which are growing in revenues, which is usually a good indication that is somebody paying for that service or product. But in other cases, actually, you don't see that. And I think that must be a clear indication for that company after a few years, if not months, to pivot somewhere else. And therefore, flexibility is very much needed in all those business models.
I think, oh, please go ahead.
One other topic I just want to mention, if we, right, all the members here, put ourselves in the customer's shoes and look at the various offerings coming at them, we also need to think about partnerships, because each of us pitching unique capabilities, how does that fall into the customer mission, how their budgets? I think that's something I would recommend when you talk about business models and financial models, partnerships being a critical aspect of that. Sorry, Charlie, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Kumar, absolutely to echo a lot of the words said here. I think understanding and mitigating risk is one of the most important things to do if you're doing any upstream kind of hardware development. And I think building strategic partnerships and engaging regulators at a really, really early stage is key. We've worked with a lot of people, and I think some parts of mission development, say something like ground segment is an afterthought, whereas it really should be something that's primary and considered an integral part of the mission. So I think considering the kind of development process and business model as a whole entity, and then in the implementation of that, again, as we've said before, engaging with the right partners, having a lot of flexibility in the schedule to do that, and I think just understanding the risks where I think a lot of people engage in these kind of development activities where they assume they can do everything. I think you've got to have the capability and the kind of war chest to be able to go, actually, I can't handle, you know, the regulatory environment of this. I need to give that to someone else, or you know, it needs to have sufficient backup to go and be able to do those and engage people.
So while we're talking about business modules and exploring opportunities from the commercial growth, commercial side growth, so how can companies also ensure that their LEO projects are safe and sustainable? Meaning, and what regulations are and the best practices should be put in place to promote responsible commercial activities in LEO as well?
Maybe one very quick point for me again on this one is, so my background's propulsion, and I think one thing that is going to become more prevalent in the future is where a satellite doesn't have a key, you know, an implied decay over a certain number of years. I think we're going to see more mandatory propulsion for deorbit, and I think that is a good practice that should be encouraged.
I would say we're at the point now where there's almost no excuse for not having this baked into your plans now, but whether it's a driver from a regulatory perspective, whether it's the fact in the context of LEO that there are dozens of companies now who are building out capabilities and service offerings that specifically address this. So, you know, that's sustainability, deorbit plans, refueling plans, and mission extension is an intrinsic part of some visions of what an emerging LEO economy will look like. So for it not to feature in your plans is, you know, a massive blind spot. And you know, for any other number of reasons, not least its awareness, you know, on the radars of investors, of regulators. You know, it's part of every conversation.
If I can jump in on that. Oh, yeah. Please go on, Mikołaj, please.
Yeah, no, go on, Ian. So sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, we're living in this time where we're seeing this huge explosion in the launch sector, and that's what, of course, the press loves to report on. Big rocket launching into orbit, very exciting. But at the same time, thruster development is hugely advanced. We're seeing ion propulsion moving really fast. We're seeing argon thrusters. I think the Starlink, there's now more Starlink argon thrusters in orbit than there have been ion thrusters to date. You know, that scale of ambition from them as well. But in Japan, we're seeing water thrusters coming into the market. We're seeing in Europe small water thrusters coming into the market too. The rate at change here is huge. And just to Simon's point, there's no excuse. And it's not just sustainability of the orbit, but it's actually sustainability of the reputation of our sector as well. We need to be in a position where we're showing ourselves to be professional outfits. It almost comes on to the point that Mikołaj was making about funding. When we go to make our IPO offering, we need to do that at the right time so we don't become a failed product on that market, because we need to protect the reputation of our sector for all of us to succeed. And you know, there's no excuse, frankly.
Yeah. What I wanted also to underline here is that it's not always something that companies can do, because sometimes we lack the law, the space regulations that are on the national level, and that's very important. And for example, we in Poland unfortunately do not have any space regulations so far. There are some plans, but nevertheless, so that's the one thing. And second thing, I think that not that many companies, from what I see, are using for example, the European SSA or SST sensors that, you know, can track your satellite and can add you to the collision avoidance service. That's something that we also need to push, because there are huge investments are being made by countries, by European Union in that area, and not that many companies from Europe are using that. So that would be also something which is quite important to add to have the safe and somehow predictable applications in the LEO.
Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree a lot with Charlie, what Charlie said about space sustainability. The maturity of the technical maturity is here. So, you know, like relying on stewardship can be also better framed. And it's also important to have in mind that space sustainability at the end of the day, it's a big picture of different solutions, and every space mission also has a different propulsion need. So this is something that needs to be taken into account when addressing these issues, is that there's a set of solutions, and to each its own mission, its own sustainability requirements. And I can only welcome also efforts being done at international level, so not only at the UN, or not only industry-led, but also what I can see in Europe at EU level, and now more and more push for EU-based law that I think will be beneficial, because from one country to another we have very, very different requirements when it comes to space debris, and this needs to change.
If I may just add to that, I mean, we do see in other sectors, companies actually can self-regulate, and indeed they can move faster than the international community can regulate too. The fact that we're holding this sort of panel, and thanks very much to you guys, Martinez, for doing this. We have that in our gift to do. Of course, it incurs business cost, but actually, in terms of being in a good place to secure those partnerships, actually trying to push yourself to that standard of sustainability, I think is actually right. And I've very rarely met anyone in the field that doesn't intuitively agree with that premise. So I think it would be a good business move to do it anyway. So hopefully we can hold ourselves to the higher standards, and also lobby our own governments to enact those standards if they don't exist.
Okay, so obviously there is both ends of the spectrum here, so it's not all bad and negative. Again, when we're talking about sustainability, also talking about the positive side of things. And what role can commercial LEO destinations play in supporting the growth of the broader space industry, including the development of the new space applications and services?
I mean, I'm ready. We're all being polite. I'll jump in. I mean, we've spoken about the fact that there's mass constellations happening, and that's all great. But in terms of how do we enable the broader economy, I think the fact that you can get to LEO for, not all that much money at all, I was going to make a flippant comment about a cruise or something. Access to LEO is becoming incredibly affordable, incredibly flexible, and really very reliable as well. That prototyping element, I think, to me feels an incredibly powerful thing that LEO can provide for the broader economy, and indeed can proof of concept a much larger business case that might be served by a different orbit ideally. So even if the orbit is not perfect for your application, the application could be proven, and a MEO orbit could follow, or something similar. So I think that side of it, treating it almost like a skunk works, and all the sustainability stuff around it, could be a viable thing for certain businesses.
I think
I'm going to double down on my past comments about partnerships. If you look at some of the customers Maxar has, we do have defense customers where we use the term sensor to decision. That means we need to bring the information to the war fighters as quickly as possible. So we specialize in electro-optical sensors, and we look at the broader ecosystem of inter-satellite links, onboard processing, those kinds of partners, so that we can actually leverage those and fulfill a customer mission. So that's how I see us as established companies in the space, working with other new space companies and helping them actually grow as well.
I resonate a lot with what other things that have been said. So the LEO orbit actually is ideal and has been traditionally used for testing things, and still today is very much the case. So the accessibility is improved, and therefore it's even easier to do something like that. So that has actually helped a lot the proliferation of a number of deployment of CubeSat constellation, but not only that, also larger satellite like the one that we produce ourselves. The next mission that we're going to launch at the end of the year is going to have in-orbit demonstration of 3 different customers on board. The one that we are launching in a couple of years as well, which is actually up to 150-kilogram satellite, so it's more massive than this one of this year. It's also going to have even 15 different technologies demonstrated on board, and some of them, to your point, Martinez, some of them very much related to potential application in telecommunication intended as 6G, IoT, optical communication and these kind of things. So I think it stays as an ideal place where you test the stuff, right? And not only with small, but also with bigger satellites.
Yeah, I think just to again like give a case study, which I think wraps up all these points really well, is we've done something similar with our latest IOD program. We integrated our hosted payload was by a customer called Horizon, and this is a customer who works in aerospace, but they've never done any space missions before. They've done optical things on planes, but in terms of running a space mission, that's something they've never done before. And I think bringing in a totally new customer within the space industry and having a mission done in 2 years is not something that could have been done previously. And I think this is why, lowering launch costs and making this kind of access and, streamline process easier is seeing people like this enter the market, which is really great.
And if I may expand on the commercial LEO destination, also in the frame of commercial space platforms and stations. So what we see is that these future commercial stations will also be providing as a platform or as infrastructure and even as a marketplace for industrial applications that are also related to non-space. And so it allows us already now to engage with non-space. And I mean, just to give one example of where we can see also new applications and services towards non-space customers is development of high throughput drug testing platform, for example, that can use the environment of low Earth orbit that is unique for this type of then R&D applications and services.
So speaking now about development, and obviously when we talk about development growth, one word comes to my mind, which is partnerships. So the question here is, what role do public-private partnerships play in the development of the commercial LEO destinations, and how can government entities collaborate with private companies to support the growth of the industry?
I can perhaps go first on that if you like. Hugely important, I think, is the short answer. I think as much as we talked about the barriers to entry and the scale of investment perhaps being lower for activities in LEO than has traditionally been thought about, if we think about that in the context of commercial stations, we're still talking about huge endeavors, right? So both in the context of the requirement for there to be public investment alongside private investment, I think that's absolutely critical. We hear that repeatedly from every industrial player. Closely aligned to that, I think, is government acting as or public entities acting as an anchor tenant, at least for the foreseeable future. So yeah, no question that just from the scale of investment required and the complexity of the problem and the long-term nature of developing these kind of capabilities is absolutely critical.
Yeah, if I can build on that, Martinez, completely agree with what Simon said. There's almost broadly two stages. There's the enabling tech, and that stage is high risk. And I think this is where maybe governments could be doing more and understanding it better. And I would dare say the government that understands this well enough and finds a proper blueprint for doing this might be well placed to benefit from the expected. I'm sure we all expect huge growth in this market, but enabling risk to be actually tackled and handled by manufacturers and new spacecraft missions, so that those VCs aren't feeling the burden of trying to get that first thing to market. But then, of course, what you have is that first proof of concept, and then trying to build out a business plan. And at some point, we know this. Even the large players in the system often still need government support for that interim stage where they're then going from proof of concept to full deployment of a business case. So without it, our industry will really struggle despite these barriers being removed. So I think it's almost another one of those things to say we should be doing more to lobby. I will confess I'm actually a politician myself as well. So that's something tragic to admit in front of a bunch of engineers and scientists. But there's more that should be done there, and I think it's something that other industries they're used to this this side of this world, and they're very, very good at it. But traditionally, there's only a handful of primes across Europe who are doing this lobbying. But now we're seeing so many manufacturers, so many different missions. We need to work out how we coordinate ourselves to continue that work in a more broader sense.
I wanted to underline that there is a when I first heard the question, I had the temptation of replying, well, government should stay out of that as much as possible, because and I don't mean that really. And so what I'm saying is that there is an evil side of that, right? Which is that particularly not too much about governments, but institutions like the NASA and ESA. There has been a traditional tendency to get too much into the innovation game and not allowing flexible, smart companies to develop their own ideas and their own concept. Right? Is the famous topic of the ECSS standard, for example, applied to developments in the space industry. So I think that whenever there is a right balance found between the risk-adverse approach, or some aspect of the risk-adverse approach of certain institution, and the emergence of technology, and the right balance is found, and we have struggled our way to find that. I think we find it very much now, but in previous years it has not been easy at all. When that is found, then you have a jewel in your hands, because really you have expertise and support, and of course funding, and at the same time you can still allow your dynamism to develop the right solution for the marketplace, which is the most important thing. But there is always, as I say, there is always an evil side which is there behind the corner.
Yeah, some of the positive things I'm watching, by the way, I'm based out of the United States. I'm actually noticing is that I know there was mention of lobbying, but I think broader awareness through policies. A lot of developments I'm seeing in the United States and globally, both military and federal agencies, they are developing these policies for commercial first. If there is a technology from commercial that can fulfill the need, they're developing those policies. So I will double down on the lobbying aspect of it is, let's push our politicians and others to start supporting. And one of my colleagues is a salesperson, and he told me something very interesting. Don't try to solve the exotic problems of the customer, try to solve the mundane problems they don't want to do. So have that philosophy in place as well, so that they can start trusting commercial to replace or complement what they're doing.
Yeah, I very much agree with what Kumar and Edgar said. What I would like to also point out is that with all those advancements in space that we have right now, with all those new frontiers that, for example, SpaceX is opening to us, we all have to remember that the governmental bodies and agencies, they are kind of lacking in terms of the knowledge, and they are quite behind of novelties. And with the pace that we have right now in the space sector development, they either have to get those knowledge pretty fast, or they have to risk the money before they will sign, the PPP. So that's something which, especially in emerging countries, that's a very big challenge, how to, get in touch and how to talk with governmental bodies when they do not really understand some connections between what's doable and what's something which they want to do. So that's also very important topic that in United States, as you mentioned, probably it's not the case, but Eastern Europe or Africa or Asia, that's very, very important stuff to deal with.
Okay, so now as we're coming to an end of this panel, obviously a lot of things we have covered today, a lot of great insights for all of you, which greatly appreciated for that in terms of the operations, activities, services, applications, and obviously what's coming to the future and crucial aspects when it comes to fostering collaboration amongst stakeholders, including governments, regulatory bodies, and industrial partners, for the peaceful and safe use of the commercial space activities. So for everybody here that are watching this session live, you can, by the way, connect with the panel speakers by clicking the link that's in the chat. and find a place to connect with each of the panelists and request a private one-on-one session for business or B2C, B2B conversation with them off the record after the session is over here. Or if you're watching this recording, you're also going to find this link included, which give you access to that request meeting form, or a way to follow a company and their updates, what the company is working on as well. So once again, I really appreciate everybody's here time today. Wish you a fantastic day, and hopefully we're going to see you here next year with SAIC at 24 with a lot of great updates and news regarding your activities as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Great panel.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.